One of the things that I'm concerned about, and I think every American is concerned about, is the reputation of the Congress of the United States in the eyes of the American people. We know what our approval ratings are, and we're well aware of it. But we often don't take a moment and pause and say, what are the things that we could do to have the American people once again view this chamber, the People's House, as a place of honor, as a place that is actually doing the people's business. Here we are 48 hours away from a recess. We're going to be going back and talking with the people in our districts. Each one of us represents around 700,000 American citizens. And we're going to go home and we're going to spend some time talking with those citizens. I think it's appropriate. However, I also think it's appropriate for us to get our work done. And I want to talk this morning, Mr. Speaker, about a key fundamental requirement of the law of this Congress, and that is to provide the nation and the American people with a budget that is fiscally secure and to provide for spending bills under the law so that the money that the taxpayers are sending to Washington, D.C., they are aware of how that money is being spent. This is 2014, Mr. Speaker. Leaving for the entire month of August was a tradition that, as I've read, been brought to this chamber because of the extreme heat of the city of Washington, D.C. prior to air conditioning. But here we are in 2014, the building's air conditioned and the lights are on, relatively comfortable place to work. We could stay here and actually finish up some of the work of the people. For example, in 1974, 4 decades ago, the Congress of the United States passed a budget act, and the President signed into law a budget act that requires the Congress of the United States to actually pass a budget and to do its spending bills and complete them by September 30th. In 4 decades, and here we are in the 40th anniversary of that law, in 4 decades, it has not happened even one time where the Congress did its work and completed its spending bills within the amount of time allotted under the law. American people are struck by that. How can the Congress of the United States ignore the law? How can the Congress of the United States say we're going to bind ourselves in agreement, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate and the President, and we're going to agree to do these things? Well, quite frankly, the law had one weakness. It had no enforcement trigger in it. A few years ago, a good friend of mine, a gentleman from across the aisle, Mr. Congressman Jim Cooper from Nashville, Tennessee, wrote a piece of legislation called No Budget, No Pay. A couple of years ago, we finally signed that bill into law, at least part of it. And for the first time since I've been in Congress, the Senate of the United States actually passed a budget because they found out that if they didn't, there would be an enforcement trigger that happened. I've recently written a bill called Do Your Job Act, which would require the Congress to do all 13 or all 12 of their spending bills prior to the end of the year, or they can't recess for more than 24 hours. They have to stay here and do their job so the American people can see firsthand what our priorities are. I came to Congress in 2011, Mr. Speaker, and in the 4 years that I've been here, we've been required by law to pass 48 spending bills. The U.S. Senate, in those 4 years' time, have passed 2. The House has done quite a bit better. They've passed 24. But they're required to pass 48. This year, the Senate has passed 0. 0. They've done none. The House of Representatives have passed 7 and have referred another 4 out of committee that are ready to go. We ought to stay here and pass those bills and send them to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, this is the people's house. We ought to be here doing the people's business for the good of the American people. We should stay here and do our job. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.